I never thought my world could collapse in a single moment. But that day, as I stood in front of what was supposed to be my dream house, I felt my heart shatter into 1,000 pieces. The house I had imagined raising my children in, the one I had picked every detail for, from the soft cream-colored walls to the oak wood floors, was now in the hands of another woman. Maxwell had betrayed me. I had sensed something was off for weeks. Late-night phone calls, sudden business trips, and his cold, distant stares. But nothing prepared me for the truth. I discovered it in the cruelest way possible, by accident. That afternoon, I drove to the house, hoping to see the final touches before we officially moved in. But instead of workers adding the last details, I saw a woman, dressed in silk, standing on the porch, holding a set of keys. She was smiling. Comfortable. Like she belonged there. I parked the car and stepped out, my heart pounding. She turned, her eyes locking onto mine with an expression I couldn't quite read. Then, before I could speak, Maxwell walked out of the front door, his hand resting casually on her back. My stomach twisted. Maxwell. My voice barely came out. He had the audacity to look surprised, as if he hadn't expected me to be there. The woman, with her perfectly manicured nails and air of confidence, smirked. "Oh, you must be Gift." I felt like I had been punched in the gut. I confronted him right there, in front of her, not caring who was watching. "What is this, Maxwell? Why is she holding the keys to our house?" He sighed, like I was a child throwing a tantrum. "Gift, I was going to tell you." "When?" "After she changed the curtains. After she moved in." My voice rose, the betrayal cutting through me like a knife. The woman, Amber as I later found out, leaned against the doorway, watching us with a bored expression. "You sold our house." My voice cracked. "I didn't sell it," he said, rubbing his temples. "I transferred it." I blinked. "Transferred?" He exhaled deeply, avoiding my gaze. "To Amber." The world tilted. The house I had fought for, worked for, sacrificed for, was now in her name. I felt my knees weaken, but I refused to break in front of them. Amber stepped forward, her heels clicking against the marble porch. "Maybe we should go inside, Maxwell. This conversation seems unnecessary." "Unnecessary?" I turned to him. "You threw everything away for this." Maxwell clenched his jaw. "You don't understand." I shook my head, stepping back. I did understand. He had made his choice. I left without another word, but deep inside, something told me this wasn't over. I couldn't sleep that night. Betrayal sat heavy in my chest, but something else gnawed at me, curiosity. Maxwell wasn't stupid. He was calculated. If he transferred the house, there had to be a reason, and I needed to find it. I dug through my files, searching for the property documents. Hours later, my hands shook as I read through the fine print of the deed. And that's when I saw it. A mistake. A small, easily overlooked detail. Maxwell had transferred the house, yes, but not in the way he thought. Hidden deep in the legal jargon was a clause that would change everything. And that's when I smiled for the first time since my world fell apart. Maxwell thought he had won. But he was wrong. I wasn't going to let Maxwell walk away so easily. After everything he had done, after throwing away our years together for another woman, I had every right to crumble. But I wouldn't. I had spent years studying law, handling cases, and picking apart contracts for a living. If Maxwell thought I would sit back and let him humiliate me, he had underestimated the wrong woman. I knew exactly how to fight back. The first step was understanding what I had in my hands. That small clause buried in the deed wasn't just a mistake, it was a ticking time bomb. Maxwell had transferred the house, yes, but he hadn't done it properly. His eagerness to rush the process had blinded him to the fine print, and that was where I would strike. I reached out to an old friend, a real estate attorney with a sharp eye for legal loopholes. Together we combed through the documents, verifying every detail. And when we were done, a plan started to form. Maxwell had always been reckless, but his arrogance would be his downfall. I made sure word got around that I was filing legal action against him. Not directly, of course. I wanted him to hear whispers, rumors that would force him to panic. I needed him to act before he had time to think. Then, I quietly set things in motion. Legal letters were sent. Tax offices were notified. Banks were given reason to look deeper into recent financial transactions. It didn't take long before I got the call. He showed up at my office unannounced. His usual charm was gone, replaced with frustration and something else, fear. "Gift, we need to talk." I leaned back in my chair, arms crossed. "Oh? About what?" He hesitated, his eyes darting around the room like he was searching for an escape. "This lawsuit, you don't have to do this." I let out a small laugh. "I don't have to. Maxwell, you transferred my dream house to another woman behind my back. You left me with nothing. And now you want to talk." He ran a hand over his face. "You don't understand. There's a problem." "Oh, I understand just fine." He swallowed hard. "The house transfer, there were complications." I tilted my head. "Oh? You mean how you still technically owe property taxes on it? Or the fact that transferring an asset of that value without proper documentation triggers an automatic tax audit?" His face paled. I smiled. "Yes, Maxwell. I know everything. And guess what? The government does too." His hands clenched into fists. "Gift, this isn't funny. You could ruin me." I stood up, leaning across the desk. "You ruined yourself. The beauty of law is that knowledge is power. And Maxwell had given me all the power I needed. With the documents I had gathered, I proved that his financial transactions were questionable at best and illegal at worst. The tax burden alone was enough to cripple him, but that wasn't all. I had traced his financial deception, how he had secretly shifted money, altered paperwork, and tried to outsmart the system. What he didn't realize was that every trick he had used to cut me out of my rights had left a paper trail leading straight back to him. "You think you won," I said, my voice calm. "But Maxwell, you just lost everything." His shoulders slumped. He knew it was over. And for the first time in weeks, I felt something deep inside me settle. Justice. I wasn't about to let Maxwell slip through my fingers. The moment I saw his panic, I knew I had him. But this wasn't the time to sit back. I had to move fast before he found a way to cover his tracks. With the help of my legal team, I filed an emergency injunction to halt any further transactions involving the house. Maxwell might have transferred it to his new woman, but the paperwork was flawed. The property still had my name attached in ways he hadn't realized, and that gave me leverage. The judge granted my request. Effective immediately, no sales, no refinancing, and no title changes could take place until the case was resolved. Maxwell had thought he could wipe me out of the picture, but now he was stuck. While Maxwell scrambled, I worked behind the scenes. I gathered every financial record, every bank transaction, every shady deal he had made. His mistakes were piling up, and I was going to use them all. I had seen men like him before, confident, arrogant, thinking they were untouchable. But the law doesn't favor arrogance. It favors preparation. And I was more prepared than he could ever be. The real turning point came faster than I expected. Maxwell had been avoiding the reality of his situation, but the moment he tried to withdraw a large sum from his bank account, he realized something was wrong. He called me in a fury. "What did you do?" His voice was sharp, desperate. I smiled to myself. "Oh, Maxwell. You'll have to be more specific." "My accounts. My money. I can't access anything." I leaned back in my chair. "Ah, that. Well, it turns out that when you commit financial fraud and attempt to hide assets, banks tend to notice. And when they do, they freeze everything until a full investigation is done." Silence. I could hear his breathing, heavy and erratic. "You set me up," he finally said. I laughed. "No, Maxwell. You set yourself up the moment you tried to take what was mine." With the evidence I provided, the court had moved quickly. His bank accounts. Frozen. His investment properties. Under review. His business dealings. Now being scrutinized by financial authorities. He had played dirty, but the law was finally catching up to him. And for the first time in my life, I felt the true weight of justice. Amber had no idea what she had walked into. When Maxwell handed her the keys to my dream house, she probably thought she had won. She must have imagined herself sipping wine in the grand living room, hosting dinner parties, basking in the victory of replacing me. But reality has a way of humbling the unprepared. The moment Maxwell's assets were frozen, Amber found herself trapped. The house she thought was hers was now entangled in a legal battle. She couldn't sell it, couldn't refinance it, and worst of all, she couldn't afford to maintain it. Taxes, utilities, upkeep, none of it had crossed her mind when she accepted Maxwell's so-called gift. But now, with no access to his money and no legal ownership she could claim, she was stuck in a mansion that felt more like a prison. I heard from mutual acquaintances that she started reaching out to Maxwell's friends, trying to understand what was happening. The responses were cold. No one wanted to get involved. She had been his prize, his trophy, but now she was just another liability. Maxwell had promised her a luxurious life, but what he failed to mention was that luxury comes with a cost she had no way to cover. The tax bill alone was suffocating. The moment the government flagged the property under dispute, fines started piling up. Maintenance crews stopped showing up when payments failed. Even something as simple as lawn care became an issue. Amber had gone from being the woman who thought she had it all to the woman begging for favors. When she finally decided to sell, she realized the full weight of her mistake. Nobody wanted to touch a house caught in legal limbo. The deed was contested, the ownership was unclear, and the pending litigation made buyers run in the opposite direction. The house, despite its value, was worthless to her. Amber tried everything, discounting the price, reaching out to private investors, even looking for loopholes. But no one wanted a property with a storm of legal trouble hovering over it. She was desperate. And when Maxwell saw that desperation, he did what he did best, he used it against her. She called him in tears. I knew because I had access to the financial records, and I could see the patterns. Each time she tried to withdraw money, nothing came through. She had no income, no assets of her own, and no way out. But Maxwell. He was furious. You said you could handle this, he must have spat at her. You told me the house was mine, she probably cried back. But Maxwell was never one to take responsibility. Instead, he lashed out. He blamed her, belittled her, made her feel like it was her incompetence that had caused this mess, not his own greed and arrogance. And just like that, the fairy tale she thought she had stepped into crumbled into a nightmare. The cracks in Amber's world had widened into deep chasms, and she was finally seeing the truth, she had never won. I could almost pity her. Almost. She had stepped into my life thinking she was taking my place, but now, standing in the ruins Maxwell had created, she realized she had only been another piece in his game. A disposable piece. When I saw her outside the courthouse, she looked nothing like the confident woman who had once flaunted my house, my life. She looked tired, defeated. I didn't need to say anything, her eyes told me she finally understood. "He used me too," she murmured, her voice shaking. I didn't respond. I simply turned and walked away. Because unlike her, I wasn't waiting for an apology. Maxwell was unraveling. Frozen accounts. Legal battles. A tax bill so massive it would take a lifetime to clear. He tried everything, calling in old favors, attempting to sell off whatever assets he still had access to, even trying to manipulate Amber into taking the fall. But the law was finally doing what I had always hoped it would, holding him accountable. I heard he even tried to contact me. Whether it was to negotiate, to beg, or to threaten, I never found out. I never answered. There was nothing left to say. The final blow came in the courtroom. The judge's verdict was clear: the fraudulent transfer of my dream house was null and void. The hidden clause in the deed had worked against him, not for him. Maxwell had lost his home, his reputation, and, soon, his freedom. Amber disappeared from his life as fast as she had entered it. Maxwell lost everything. And me? I stepped out of the courtroom into the sunlight, breathing in the crisp air of freedom. This wasn't just about winning a case. This was about reclaiming my life. Maxwell had thought he had buried me, but he had only planted me. And now, I was blooming. With one last glance at the courthouse, I walked away, ready for the new chapter waiting ahead. We appreciate you taking the time to listen to this amazing story. If you're inspired by this story, please do well to subscribe to our channel for more stories. Also, do not forget to like and share this story to your family and friends. Thank you.